Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Daffy's Roundtable. Last week you guys saw Isopods Part 1. Today, I know you're super excited. I'm super excited. Theo, are you excited?
I'm always excited.
Theo's always excited because Theo is the Isopod that's going to tell us about Isopods. If you haven't seen last week's episode, make sure you go catch it first. That was Isopods Part 1. Today, we're going to get a little bit deeper into the Isopods. We're going to talk about the care. We're going to talk about... What else are we going to talk about today, Theo?
We're going to talk about, I'd say, their behavior. We're going to talk about breeding them.
All the interesting stuff is in today's episode, but you need the basics. So go back to Isopod Part 1, watch that one, and then come back and watch this. I'm super excited for you to hear this episode, but you guys already know the drill. But before we get into the episode, let me thank the awesome Exoterra. Huge shout out to them. Always a pleasure working with them. But anyway, let me give you a huge shout out and thank you to Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, without further ado, let's get into, what did we call it last time? Isopod Madness?
Isopod Madness.
Isopod Madness. Let's get into Isopod Madness, Isopod Part 2. Everybody please help me welcome the lovely Theo, Nature State 7. Make sure you go give him a follow. Alright, so we've talked about what to feed them. Is there anything else you want to put about like the feeding or the diet topic before we jump off?
Last part would just be the things you probably shouldn't feed them.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
So, I wouldn't put meat into the Isopod bin.
Define meat.
Yeah, define meat. Any meat. I would not, even on my huge dairy cows, I wouldn't put like a frozen thawed rat. It probably wouldn't be good for them. They'll probably eat it. Mm-hmm. And I have seen in my snake terrariums where one didn't end up eating the rat that there are isopods on it, but it's gross and it's gonna smell.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here for a second. You said it's gross and it smells. Is there any other reason not to?
I don't think so.
Okay, because I mentioned earlier that I use my dairy cows for taxidermy. So technically they are eating not pinky rats, but they are eating... Actually, I have fed them a pinky rat that one of my snakes didn't eat before, but like they're eating passed away geckos or stillborn geckos or whatever, stuff like that. Yeah.
I don't know anything about taxidermy.
Okay.
But taxidermy, like when you're doing that, does it smell?
It smells when there's... It depends on the size of the animal.
Yeah, so a jumbo rat reeks.
Yeah, I bet. I'm sure.
A day.
I'm sure. We'll see, but like the things like again, like I'm giving them like geckos that didn't make it to hatching, right? Like died in the egg or just died right after hatching or something like that. So those they have cleaned up in 2 days.
No, I've heard Jen say stuff like nothing goes to waste in her house.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I've never fed them like I feed, but actually, no, that being said, I throw in like a dead fish now and then.
Okay.
If it's not like decomposed.
Right.
So that being said, like, yeah, I guess those are questionable. I wouldn't, there are some species that are going to eat it more than others. So like your dairy cows, they're probably going to demolish it. I personally wouldn't try it with almost any other. But yeah, like a small piece of animal, yeah, maybe. But like I wouldn't put like deli meat in there.
Yeah, okay, that's why I said define meat, because I was wondering if you meant like ground beef.
No, no, that's good. You're right. You've made me reconsider. So a little animal that is dead from natural causes. I'd say that's fine.
Don't kill your animals to feed them to your Isopods, please.
Don't do that. Maybe your neighbors. If you don't like, but So yeah, meat, like any meat from the grocery store, I wouldn't add. I don't think that's a good idea. A little bit of like a fresh fish that passed away in your aquarium, maybe. Other reptiles that you're talking about, maybe. But yeah, don't be buying like a steak for your isopods.
Yeah.
Anything with sugar, I don't like. Processed sugar, I don't think they like. I don't use a lot of fruit, but some people do use fruit, which does have a lot of sugar, but I don't use that.
Do apples have a lot of sugar?
Yep.
Okay.
And I know like roaches, they want citrus and apples. And
Okay,
stuff.
so that's why I actually was asking, because I do give my roaches a lot of apples.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
no,
yeah.
that might be fine for isopods. Fruit, yeah, I wouldn't give them like a Jolly Rancher or Twizzler or something like that.
Yeah. Shout out Twizzlers.
Shout out Twizzlers, yeah. Please sponsor me.
Yeah, for real.
I've heard that rice is bad.
Okay.
I've been reading for myself that like there's ways that rice can be poisonous to you.
Interesting.
If you don't like
clean it properly.
No.
Boil it properly.
If you like thaw it out, or like if you like leave it like at room temperature for too long, bacteria can develop that
Interesting.
doesn't even die when you heat it back up. I don't use any rice. I've heard some people will use dog and cat food. I don't use that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I have it accessible, and I have tried to use it, but I didn't find they liked it, and it molded weird, gross.
I've also experienced the same thing. Yeah.
And fish flakes, I don't know what it's about them. Maybe it's because they're so thin. They mold like instantly.
Crazy. Yeah.
So fish pellets good, fish flakes less good.
Okay. Even though when you're reading online basic general care, again like the WikiHow of Isopod care, the first thing they will say is fish flakes.
Yeah. So maybe if you sprinkle the tiniest bit.
Yeah.
But
I have the same experience as you. They mold too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last one that I have tried before and actually did cause problems was cereal.
Interesting.
I hope I like what do you call it? Cheerios, just like sugar-free Cheerios, and I was giving it to them, and I was like, oh, why is this guy dead every time I feed Cheerios? Like I was losing like one isopod at a time every time I'd feed Cheerios.
Wow,
and
interesting.
So I stopped. I don't know why that is. Maybe
I assume sugar.
The Cheerios I eat have no sugar.
Interesting. First of all, what do you mean the Cheerios you eat have no sugar?
There is a type that has no sugar.
That blows my mind. That's all.
But I don't know what it is about them. I think it's because it's processed. That might be it.
See, yeah, so I get this list, but these are also all things other than the fish flakes. I'd be questioning why people are thinking of putting those things, other than the dog and cat food as well. But like, who's considering, like, yeah, I don't know.
I think for a lot of compost, I don't think you're supposed to put meat in composters. Okay. But I think you put pretty much everything else.
Right.
So yeah, like, I think that they're just not the same as say like earthworms.
If anyone listening to this is very experienced and knows a lot of stuff about compost, reach out to me. Maybe we need a compost episode. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, actually. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's within the universe of the things that we like. For
absolutely,
sure. Yeah. But yeah, those are the things that I avoid, and I already use so many things. Like I don't need to experiment too much. If I hear somebody say something cool, like you're saying about powder, or like that I've heard stuff from Reptilialis and stuff, I will try it. And I will often like it, but those ones I have found are not good. They don't end up with positive results.
Yeah. Well, you hear about in different animals, not in isopods, like for example, African dwarf frogs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a common thing, again, in the care guides or whatever, people say give them beef hearts or give them stuff like that to like buff them up. But then if you really get into reading it, the experience people will say is like, yeah, they will absolutely eat it, but an excess of it or more than once every so often is what's causing the bloat or what's causing all the problems with it, with all these animals as well. But yeah, I guess that's not, you can't compare frogs to isopods, but yeah.
No, there's everything in moderation is true, but yeah, I'm not sure. I don't want to be like, I don't use beef, like people use beef heart with their fish all the time. I'm trying not to use, I've never used that.
Yeah.
I go with what's tried and true, and it seems to work, and I also like don't really like smelly things. So yeah, I think just I try to avoid the smelliest of the things.
Smelliest of the things. I feel that.
Yeah, and then do they eat living plants? Some species I think do, some don't. They're not supposed to. I don't have planted vivariums at this moment.
Okay.
Although I am ambitious to do it. So if you are interested in them in a planted vivarium, I would research which ones are good with plants or not. Are you familiar which ones are?
So I've only ever kept so many isopods. Like all of those Spanish isopods you're talking about, or all the once you get into fancy isopods, I've never dove or dived into it, whatever it is. But I've kept a bunch of armadillidium species, so like the zebras or whatever, and I've kept dairy cows, and I've kept powder blues and powder oranges, and dwarf whites and dwarf purples, in essentially every single, not together, but in every single, there's isopods in every single planted vivarium in here, whether it's just dwarf whites or whether it's different things, and all of them seem to do well. What I'll say is powder oranges, for example, thrive in any of the vivariums. Like usually like Armadillidium maculatum, they're one of my favorite isopods. I love the zebra, I love the look of them, whatever. I'll put them in, and I say 50% of the time I won't ever see them again. Whereas the powder oranges, like they're in the emerald tree skink tank behind you. If you flip anything, almost, you will see a group of them. Like they're thriving in there. Dairy cows, I have them in a lot of the mountain horde dragon tanks. They do really well. I see them. Dwarf whites, obviously, I don't see them that often. But like anyway, so my point is, I've never tried the more high-end, expensive isopods. But everything I've tried, other than Armadillidium maculatum, I would say thrives in almost every tropical environment.
And do you ever see them eating your plants?
No. Sorry, that was the topic. No, I've never seen. I see holes. So look at the different bacchia behind you. There's holes in it.
Yeah, but I don't.
But that looks like emerald tree skink nails to me, not isopod bites. So I don't think that isopods are biting anything or eating any plants. No. Yeah.
Unless it's like a leaf that has fallen off, which is what they naturally will do.
Yes, and then the argument to that though is, are they not eating the plants because they have an excess of food with the consistency of like lizard poop in there, right? Like they may have not feel the need to go for plants, but maybe if there was no leaf litter, there was no lizard poop, there was no dying leaves falling into the ground, maybe they would start eating plants.
Yep. No, an animal that is starving is going to do different things.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so
it's the same argument as the mountain horde dragons not eating the fish. If I'm constantly tongue feeding them, right? I think it was you that said this the other day, right? It was, if I'm constantly tongue feeding them, they may just not have why would I go waste my energy hunting for fish when like I'm getting worms put right in my face?
Yeah,
right.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Like I am amazed that they don't go after the fish. Like I think that they're hunters, whereas.
I'm telling you, I'm convinced if I had slower swimming fish in there, I think they'd get them.
Okay.
Which is why I was asking you the other day.
You have shrimp in that as well, and they're not going after them.
Yeah.
You have bright red shrimp.
I was gonna say if they weren't bright red, I'd say that they don't see them. But the other thing is, I also only have like 5 or 6 shrimp in there, and they majorly hang out on the sponge filter under the sponge, so I feel like they're just not seeing them. Okay. Whereas I've noticed the mountain horde dragon's attention be dragged by a moving fish. Like I've seen him turn his head, and be like, "There's something just moved." But he doesn't do anything after that. But I did tell you, and I'll say this quickly, we're getting off isopod topic really quickly, but I'll say this really quickly. I was telling you this the other day. I did watch a scene where there was a floating poop in the water, and one of the mountain horde dragons was curious, jumped in, tried to catch it, missed it. Like I can't believe he missed the floating poop. I don't know, like that's what I'm saying. If it was like, if he couldn't catch a slow floating poop, how are they gonna catch fish? But I don't know, maybe a slower swimming fish, or maybe if there's more density of plants in there and the fish struggle to kind of dart away into open space. I don't know, just theories everywhere, but we're here to talk about isopods.
They go together, like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't.
Yeah, anyway, I don't think they eat plants, and I think you can do them in vivariums, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, to wrap that up, yeah.
Yeah, and you also mentioned like you don't keep different isopods together, and I think that is also a good idea.
So I've tried it, again, in the vivariums, and 6 to 10 months, 12 months down the line, I've only ever seen one of the two species I've put in.
Yeah. So for one mechanism or another, one is outcompeting the other.
Other, yeah.
Whether it's like one actually killing the other, probably not.
Yeah.
But for some reason, one does tend to do better than the other.
Yeah.
And then people, that's another one, getting into like what I am going to term now as unwanted guests.
Yes.
Because last time we were using a word called undesirables, and after I looked it up, and that's a problematic term.
Is it
so
really?
I did not mean that in a problematic way.
Please don't cancel us.
Yes, please don't cancel us.
Yeah. So when for those of you that haven't seen the shrimp episode, we talked about unwanted guests, as we were calling them,
Yes.
the things that could end up in the colony, but aren't necessarily things you want. But so before we do that, since we're kind of relating this episode to that episode, I have one question for you that's a little bit off topic from anything we're talking about before.
Okay.
We've talked about so far. You keep shrimp,
Mm-hmm.
and you keep isopods.
Mm-hmm.
Very quickly, shrimp versus isopods, similarities and differences.
Yeah, like when we first were talking about this episode,
Yes,
like,
that's why
I
I'm
was
asking you this
trying to
question.
link the two together, and you said shrimp versus isopods. For me,
Yes.
it's shrimp and isopods.
Shrimp, yes.
They're very similar for the reason that they are both crustaceans. Like they're isopod almost like land, like a shrimp itself. Similarities, you are colony breeding, like you are basing the amount of food on the size of the colony. You are trying to maintain the same parameters, like to keep them happy. Differences is, as we talked about, chemistry. You're keeping a bit more track of chemistry with shrimp than with isopods.
So when I asked you why isopods, I'm assuming what would be part one, the answer I was expecting you to give was, I love shrimp, and this just seemed like the natural, progression.
I love a lot of things.
That's true.
And like when we're calling me the isopod, I'm just a larger isopod. We are all isopods in this little bin. I like them both because it is easy to make them happy and for them to do well. I avoid things that are difficult, that it is more likely for them to suffer. So I like feeding a space and having a bunch of animals run over and be like, thank you. Like, I'm so thank you for all this food.
Yeah.
Like, I like that. And they both go together. Like, I feel like they're both
roaches.
very... we've talked about this. I appreciate the roaches, but they are just a little bit too much for me.
But that's the exact reaction you get from them. You put a plate of food in, you see them all like scuttle out, like it's very cool to watch.
Yeah, I've told you, like when I'm seeing yours, like I appreciate them. I like them.
Yeah.
I just am not drawn to them. They just give me the heebie-jeebies.
Heebie-jeebies.
And
Awesome.
Those are I'd say that's the similarities. Like they're just easy to make happy. They're easy generally to do well as long as you research them. And I think that they are a very ethical, relatively, animal to keep in captivity, and something that is easy to share with others. For all of those reasons, I like isopods, I like shrimp, I like plants, I like live bearers. All of those things all share those characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be part of my answer.
Good answer.
Plus, as we'll get to eventually, you can start seeing and playing around with their genetics in a positive way.
Right.
So we'll talk about that eventually, but just like with shrimp, you can't really do this with plants unless you're really fancy.
Cross-pollinate.
Yeah, exactly. So those ideas are really cool to me.
Yeah. It's like with line breeding endlers or coming up with your own strain or something. Absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, okay. So let's leave that to that. We were on unwanted guests. I believe you called them.
Unwanted guests.
Okay.
Not a problematic term, unless I do research and it's like a super problematic term.
Okay.
So hopefully it won't be that.
Yeah.
So the unwanted guests.
Yes. Please don't cancel us.
Yeah. Please don't cancel us. Fluke will sponsor me.
Yeah.
So we got to hear from cohabitating isopods. So a lot of people will say like demon rice and stuff like that. Calling dwarf isopods like evil.
Okay.
So people will say, I've heard this from people
too.
that are respectable, people who are my friends, who I'm not going to name drop because I disagree, that a dwarf isopod will outcompete and they potentially could harm babies and mother isopods.
I'll tell you what I've heard.
Okay.
I've heard you can't even keep dwarf isopods in the same room you're keeping all your other isopods in because that's how bad they are.
So, like I mentioned about them hopping from enclosure to enclosure, that can happen.
Yeah.
But I have never once, and I have like my dairy cow colony that has been going strong forever, and that has probably produced multiple thousand isopods for the community. It has dwarf whites. I never get a dwarf white into the container that I'm giving to people, but they are definitely not affected by the dwarf whites. So I don't fear them as much. I find it annoying when I have a new culture that suddenly has dwarf whites. I don't desire to have that, but I'm not scared of them.
Okay.
Some people are, and maybe there's truth to that, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. Are there any other unwanted guests that you can?
Yeah. So, like when we were talking about shrimp, we were talking about some things that could potentially be harmful for the shrimp.
Yeah, I remember like planaria or
planaria and
hydra,
scuds. Yeah, those things could potentially hurt the shrimp.
Right.
I have heard of mites that could hurt the isopods.
Okay.
There are many different types of mites, and
too many.
Yeah, there's a lot, and that's fine. The ones that you typically will get from, say, a bag of soil are grain mites, or a type of mite that is another detritivore and will not touch a living animal.
Okay, will they outcompete with them though?
Not if you're putting in enough food. Like, it's the same as the dwarf whites. Like, I don't have a problem with them feeding a good amount.
Can you drown them out? Not drown them out with water. Can you drown them out with like somehow getting your isopod colony to outcompete them?
I don't think you can outcompete dwarf whites.
No, like the
springtails will usually, they say, not only outcompete fungus gnats and grain mites, but they say that they will eat their eggs.
The springtails will eat fungus gnats' eggs?
Yes. I've heard that. Maybe that's wrong again, but
I've heard the same thing actually.
You have? Yeah, so like I don't really have problems with any of those because I assume, because I have a lot of springtails in my enclosures.
Yeah.
I have had grain mites. They're kind of normal.
I was told that grain mites, and I've disproven this, at least this one statement, which is grain mites are a natural occurrence in every bioactive cycle. Like the claim was that as you're cycling your, again, quote unquote, bioactive enclosure, the grain mites are a natural process that eventually they come, they boom, and then they crash.
Yeah.
And that the only way to get rid of them faster would be to springtails, to add more springtails. Now I was adding more springtails, but I don't know if that's what made the grain mites crash, or if they created such a big colony that they outcompeted themselves and the crash kind of boomed, or the boom kind of crashed. But that being said, I have set up many bioactive vivariums since, again, quote unquote bioactive, and I've never had a grain mite problem since. So it's not a thing in the natural cycle of the vivarium.
I don't think it always happens.
Yeah.
It can happen. It's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
If you see a bunch of grain mites on a dead isopod, that's kind of normal. If you see a bunch of mites on your living isopods, which I have never seen in my life, and I don't think I've ever even seen a picture of, although I haven't looked for it, then there's an issue there. And the way you deal with that, I don't know. I had grain mites in my whiteworm cultures,
Okay.
And then I was putting them in the fridge because that's what
That's
white
where
worms like.
Absolutely, yeah.
They like to be cold, and that got rid of the grain mice. So, yeah, I am not worried about any of the unwanted guests. We laughed in the shrimp talk about my enemies that really drive me up the wall.
Yeah.
For shrimp, I don't got that for isopods.
Okay.
And maybe that's another reason why they're just so like benevolent and easy. There's less health problems to look out for. There's less pests to look out for. Yeah, any of those reasons, I'd say you don't really need to worry about things getting into your enclosure. Probably avoid it, just like you don't like when flies are coming at you.
Man, they end up in my drinks. They end up in my water. They end up in everywhere.
Okay.
No, but also like you have to take into context that it wasn't just like I had this entire rack was almost entirely dart frogs, right? So I was doing like 15 cultures a week, and like so there was flies everywhere.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
like when we're keeping these things like in concentration, like I noticed the spiders around my area where I have bugs and stuff, they increase.
Yeah,
Like
me too.
we're creating an ecosystem. We're creating a whole bunch of things around. It's natural for there
Those
to
spiders
be
are getting pretty
animals
big.
outside. Yeah,
I think we
like
made that joke on the Reed episode as well.
I don't like the spiders in my room, but anywhere else, I'm okay with them. Yeah, that's about it for our unwanted guests.
Awesome. Okay, so not many things you have to. Okay, so again, unwanted guests. Just before we get off them, is there anything other than unwanted guests that you have to worry about when keeping isopods?
The thing that I fear most is them drying out. After that, I fear them being too wet. That's almost everything that I am worried about. Like, I can't, unless you can remember something else I said, I don't really worry about anything else.
Awesome.
I am a little bit concerned for genetics, and we will talk about that later when we're talking about breeding and genetics. But even that is so minimal. Like, I don't have many concerns about isopod keeping, whereas like with fish keeping, reptile keeping, bird keeping, dogs, cats,
Everything, yeah.
there are issues, but isopods, keep them the right amount of wet and the right amount of dry, and you're good.
Earlier in the episode, and this may have also been in part 1, since I'm not sure which part is going to be part 1 and part 2, but anyway, so earlier in the episode and or part 1, you mentioned you've never kept your isopods in terrariums, and I asked you about do you think you can kind of acclimate them to not scatter as fast when you come near the bin or the terrarium or whatever it is. You said no. You said you don't know, but you did say you've witnessed other behaviors that we could talk about. So maybe let's get into some of those behaviors.
Yeah, so like talking about that, like erratic movements.
Yeah, like the scattering.
Yeah, like usually that's not great. Like that'll happen.
Yeah.
But like if you're seeing your isopods constantly running around, that might mean that they're not comfortable.
Okay.
So like, I don't know, if you're observing your isopods and they are freaking out even without you interacting with them, that's probably a bad sign that something is off. I have definitely found like my dairy cows are very comfortable. And there are
actually mine too.
Yeah, there are isopods that are more comfortable than others.
Yeah.
But there are other isopods, like say rubber duckies, that will be underground a good amount of the time.
Okay.
So behaviors will change between species, and definitely like if you have them next to a TV that is playing explosions and stuff like that, that's probably not good for them. If you are slow.
What do you put on your TV?
I don't have a TV in my in my basement.
No, I just said who's watching explosions?
I blast rap music.
Okay,
like,
yeah, but not explosions.
No, I'm not.
You're not watching horror movies in the basement.
I do love horror movies, but I don't watch. Actually, I have watched horror movies in the basement sometimes when I was really binging horror movies. But yeah, I'm
Okay,
more
you
just
got
saying like I know
I got us off on a tangent.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm more just saying like just be conscious around them. It's like we were at a store one time and a kid was clapping, like intentionally to make the fish freak out, and
Yeah.
the fish were freaking out.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should be conscious
And
of
don't
what
tap
you
on the
do
glass.
around them. Like, don't tap on the friggin' glass.
Don't tap on the glass. Yeah.
You should be careful, and like I think we said earlier, like you shouldn't be lifting up the wood too often to look at the isopods. Like if you do that every feeding, that's all right, I'd say. If I do it every 2 or 3 feedings, some of them I like to look at more than others because I love them, but I wouldn't be lifting up their enclosure every day.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I've become a little bit more careful with is that some of the isopods will dig, so I am really careful when moving the boxes because I don't want their tunnels to collapse. Like my dairy cows, for example, I have it in a big bin on the ground and I don't move the bin.
They dig? Dairy cows dig?
I'm pretty sure I'm seeing holes and stuff.
I was about to ask you, like, what species do you think dig more? I find that the Cubaris dig more than...
Definitely.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Definitely. And Pocilio
Yeah, you just said
be...
the rubber duckies. I never come to rubber duckies, but yeah, okay, yeah.
So Cubaris definitely will dig more. I think Pocilio, which is a big family, which includes the giant ones and the powders and stuff like that, are more up on the ground, I think.
Pocilio is not the powders.
That's Pocilionoid, I guess.
Yeah.
But similar. They look the same.
Yeah.
Like they're smaller. I would just be conscious of what you do around anything.
Right.
And
no, of course, yeah. I mean,
yeah, so we talked about they like being in groups. There's something about them that most animals feel safer when they're around other animals. Some hate the company of others, humans and other animals, but isopods definitely like to be together. They will clump up together, except for, as I mentioned, with the bigger Spanish isopods, which have and Mediterranean isopods, I should say, that have interesting characteristics that, like, they will have, like, a male that is territorial over a particular area, and then you want to really be careful not to have too many in one enclosure or enough hides and enough space so that they can all have their little base. Isopods will typically be hiding together either for safety in numbers or to conserve heat and humidity, maybe. But they like to be surrounded by others. So finding like slower movement and groups huddled together, I'd say that's healthy behavior. Always running around and being solo, I'd say that's probably a little bit of a cause for concern. Yeah.
And when you see something like that, would it be cause for concern? Change your setup, switch your, like, obviously it's a husbandry issue, right? Is it like,
yeah?
Is it usually, would you say it's immediately too wet or too dry, or are there other things that you would be worried about?
Yeah, too wet, too dry, too many isopods, too many explosions. Any of
TV too loud.
Yeah, so any of those things, like I like a lot. I've heard so many times at the store when people would say like, I don't know what the issue is, like, and then I'm like, do you have a dog that is barking right beside your animal?
Yeah.
You're like, yep.
Yeah.
Like,
is that specifically for isopods or just for other things?
For isopods.
Yeah.
I'd just be careful.
Yeah.
And then, like, of course, like, pesticides and stuff like that. Like, there's always a story of, like, somebody's apartment getting gassed or something like that. Or, and then aerial sprays. Like, I don't use any sprays. I know that from fish tanks.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put anything in the air.
Right.
I don't use cologne or anything like that. I use deodorant. But, like, I would be very careful what you put in the air. I don't sweat very much. I have a Mediterranean blood. Do you sweat very much?
All the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was just from drier climates, but I guess not.
No, I don't know why. It's weird. You would think so, right? You would think that, like, I should be used to the heat and I don't sweat a lot. But no, I used to make a joke that I have a PhD in sweating. I sweat very, very frequently.
Okay.
But I also get very cold very easily. So I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just made to live at like the perfect 25 degrees Celsius. No colder, no warmer.
Yeah, you need that perfect humidity gradient.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then...
I'm an isopod.
Yeah, we are all isopods, buddy. So we talked about sort of competition between different isopods. We've talked about competition within the own isopod community. So yeah, don't have a huge overpopulation. That's probably gonna cause problems.
Yeah.
We've talked about aggression, potential aggression towards reptiles and stuff like that. Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't.
It doesn't. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Some isopods, which I hope you all know what isopods are. It's the classic like roly-poly. Like you'll find them in your basement, you'll find them outside. Like
this is like mid episode 2, so if they don't know what an isopod is by now, I'd be worried.
So the isopods will roll, some, especially Armadillium and stuff and Cubaris, will roll up in a ball. When that happens, try to leave them alone. As we talked about in that little video from the insectarium, some of the Spanish species will pretend they're a scorpion, which is super cool, and they'll like put their little back part, like stinginess, it's not a stinger, but they'll pretend.
They'll pretend it's a stinger.
I only found out about that recently, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool.
If you don't know what he's talking about, go check out Daffy's Reptiles YouTube channel. The video is called I Ate Worms and Bought Moths, something like that. The video will be out before this. Go watch. There's a section where Theo shows off some of the isopods he buys, and you see what he's talking about by the stingy thingy. But sorry, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and other than that, like, some of them have cool, like, defensive mimicry. Like, we know this from biology. Like, some animals will mimic other animals. Like, you'll have, like, the monarch butterfly, which is toxic. It was eating milkweed.
Yeah.
And then you have the viceroy butterfly that is not toxic, but looks like the monarch, so that it can benefit from animals being like, oh, I don't want to eat that butterfly because it'll make me puke.
Right.
So like the clowns in particular are really cool because they look like mini centipedes.
Yeah, interesting.
Got like the little dots. So that can happen with some isopods. Yeah, I'd say behaviors. What other behaviors can you see? There's maternal behaviors in a lot of them.
You mentioned this a few times. You mentioned they dig a hole and they put their babies in the hole and stuff like that. So do you think that like there's actual like maternal care in some species of isopods?
I do think so. I'm fairly certain of it. I think that there are times when an animal can eat its baby.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not even its baby. Maybe it's a neighbor's baby. But I have definitely seen in the Mediterranean, big Mediterranean species, that there will be a mother on top of a hole where the babies are.
Interesting.
And then I do also see babies on a piece of wood with one or two big isopods beside them.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but...
No, but you also said usually it's the same group of colony on one, or same group on one cork bark.
It's at least the same numbers.
Yeah, and you said it's like, you think if you separate the babies from the mom too early, they don't do as well. So it does seem like there is some form of maternal behavior.
Yeah, it's
parental behavior.
Exactly, and like there's something to be said about getting raised by an adult. Like I see that with a lot of other things that like, and I'm starting to really try to get my epistos to raise their babies, because like if you don't have an adult to mimic their behavior, you're gonna be scared, one, and you're going to be slower to develop, I would say. Like you're going to be hiding a lot more. You're going to need to learn the ropes by yourself.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it takes longer to learn the ropes by yourself as opposed to being taught by a parent.
Yes.
Okay. So I only bred one type of episto, which you know of, but I found that one, and like I've never tried to get them to raise their own babies, but I found that separating them, they didn't have a problem learning instincts.
Yeah, like, so you kept them in like bare bottom tanks, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Babies, not the adults. Yeah.
So we separate the epistos because there is a pretty high risk that the epistos will eat their babies.
Eat their own babies, yeah.
I have also heard that if you give them the chance to raise their young, they go one or two times where they freak out.
Multiple turns, yeah.
They freak out and they eat their babies, which happens.
Yeah.
But
even in humans.
Of course. Yeah, of course. But they will learn to raise them potentially. When I don't use bare bottom tanks. What I do is I separate the babies and put them in a fully planted tank, and they will just completely disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be like, oh, they're all dead? Okay.
Yeah.
And then they'll all come out.
Yeah.
With time.
Yeah. So do you continue to feed the tank when you think they're all dead?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like forever.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Whereas I have seen the Apistos in other videos and stuff like that, the same size of baby, and they're all out free swimming in a group.
Because they have the mom with them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
Do you want an Apisto episode? Comment below. Let us know. We'll do an Apisto episode.
You're going to get one whether you like it or not.
Yeah. I think the most fascinating thing about them, not to get off the tangent, but I think the most fascinating thing I ever heard about them is that the mothers turn yellow during breeding season, so that they act kind of like a beacon of light for the babies to kind of follow them around in dark waters.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I just figured it was just telling the male that it's time to breed, but that is a much more interesting reason. But there's a lot of things that are interesting about Apistos, like their connection to moons and the connection to rain.
And pH of water, temperature of water.
Hopefully me, you, and Greg can have that episode, because that's...
Yeah, we'll make it happen. Let us know, do you want an Apisto episode? Okay, anyway, you were saying.
So I'd say that is it for behaviors.
Okay.
There's probably more behaviors, and that's the cool part about animals is look close, like take the time, appreciate what you have, observe them, try to be the isopod, and
be one with the isopod.
I think there's a lot to gain.
Yeah.
As a writer, I always try to stack the end with the things that are the most interesting.
Okay.
So be interested.
So this is the best part of the whole 2 episodes.
In my opinion. And it's always like a hierarchy. It's all a layer. You can't have these last parts if you don't have the first parts.
Absolutely. What he's saying is go back and listen to episode 1.
So the first part is, I'd say, my tips that I have learned for keeping large collections. But these things apply to smaller collections too. So efficiency, but still care, is an important thing for any of these hobbies when you really start getting into them, to make it so that you are not dedicating your entire life to work.
Which you already do anyway.
I've got a day job.
Yeah.
But I do, like last year when I was doing I wouldn't say bare minimum of care, but I wasn't enjoying it, so I wasn't really pushing forward.
Yeah.
I was just kind of maintaining the status quo.
Yeah.
Now I'm really back into it, really enjoying it. I am improving.
Yeah.
Improving my enclosures, working on my lines.
But it's always an improvement in a reptile room, right? Or a fish room or whatever. You're always trying to get to the next level or nicer tanks, next upgrade, new enclosure, whatever.
Yeah, but no, there's some times where you're stagnating. And then we talked about this today with Jason. There are times where you lose interest. Life gets busy.
Yeah.
Some people have a kid.
Yeah.
I don't have a kid. I was doing intensive school, and it was kind of crushing me. And the things that I was enjoying didn't give me as much enjoyment anymore.
Right. Yeah, you were just stressed out and tired in general. Yeah, absolutely.
And there are many people, and no hate on them, that crumble when that happens.
Yeah.
And they leave the hobby.
Yes.
I have never left any of these hobbies.
Yes.
I have been in it a long time. Or not a long time, I'm not that old.
A long time.
But yeah, I've been doing this since I moved out at 18. And I'm 30 now. I persevere. As I've said, I'm no master of anything, but I am good at doing things efficiently and doing them pretty well. So these are my tips that can be applied to small collections, to large collections, to really anything that you are doing in your life maybe. And I don't want to be preachy, but you can do that. Some people are fine taking their time and being slow. For me, say for chores or any of these things, I'm trying to do it so that I do it well, but it takes the least amount of time. So, efficiency, like being able to feed and water and do your care as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, because 40 bins must take a long time.
It definitely can if you are taking one bin out at a time, adding all the things that I said one at a time. For me, as I was describing to you earlier, and I think I'm going to make a post about it, maybe my first post back or maybe my second. I have a room that has racks along all sides of fish and my isopods. What I do is I put a nice blanket on the ground.
Can I include a picture of your room?
Yeah, no, well, eventually, dude, we'll do a room tour.
Yeah.
Even though, yeah, like, maybe I should say this to the end, but we got to do an episode about you. You need to do an episode about you.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for a while.
You have been telling me this for a while.
People need to know who you are.
Yes. Yes.
Because you are cool.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
But
if you want an episode about me, let me know in the comments. Yeah. Maybe we should do that. I don't know. I've never done an introduction episode.
Letting a camera into my sacred space, I think I'm ready for that.
Yeah. We should definitely do a room tour in your
nothing
basement.
to hide. It's just I've never been about showing it to the masses.
Yeah.
But like I love having my friends, both normies and your like we had the other day, like a couple weeks ago, like just a bunch of reptile people downstairs, just like us having fun.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it is sharing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So
it's the community.
It's the community, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're all isopods. So what I do, I've got picture a square with rocks all around. I will take all of the bins and put it around me in a square.
Mm-hmm.
So around me in a square, take off all the lids, have all the food that I need to feed them in my middle, and I will just assembly line it. It takes a little bit of effort to know how much you're going to feed each tank, each enclosure, because they're going to be different based on what we talked about. But I will just go through, often with my hands. I'll be like, mushroom, 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 carrot, 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 rapashi, 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 rapashi.
Yeah.
And I can get 40 enclosures done efficiently in about 40 minutes.
A minute per enclosure?
About that.
Okay.
And that's with me occasionally taking a drink of my beer.
Yeah.
And
I'm all out of drinks.
I'd say that is a good idea. That is the way that I have found to do things efficiently. There's a lot of other people that like to take the time to do it. And if it's your day job, which it's not for most people, but yeah, do it. But for me, I only have a certain amount of time on weeknights and a certain amount of time on the weekend to spend in the basement. I have a lot of projects going on. I want to do it as efficiently as possible. And that was the primary way to do it. The only other little tip that I've had, which when I figured this out, I loved it. It honestly came to me when I was falling asleep, is the fish food grinder.
Yes.
Get an electric, if you have multiple fish tanks or multiple isopods containers, get an electric pepper grinder.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And it's like a thing that you can probably understand what it is. You press a button and it grinds your pepper for you. Put fish food in it and just
you get so many done so fast. Yeah.
No, we started doing that at the store and it was just
super.
For me,
efficient.
it was a revolution. I don't think it's kept up.
Last time I was there, I saw it.
Really?
I didn't see them using it, but the pepper grinder's still there and it's full. So
respect.
Yeah. It must still be being used.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because so anyway, I did that. I was doing that at the store too. Any way you can make your job faster, but still do it well, it might be a good idea.
So you use the pepper grinder for the isopods as well?
Yeah, when I'm feeding pellets.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Someone was talking about. This is a side thing, which maybe it's a big too much of a rant, but they were talking about they have these reef fish that need to be eating all the time.
Okay.
So they have this basically a reactor. So picture like a big container above their tank with air pump going through it.
Okay.
And a little valve. and they put frozen food in it, and the frozen food is spinning around and slowly getting dispersed into the aquarium. Like, and they told me like it lasts like 12 hours.
That's crazy.
So that's an interesting thing, but
That's
that's a complete aside.
Well, so Greg, on the same kind of note, you see how Greg built the watering thing and the feeder for his quail?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a bucket on top, and he fills it with water, and there's a valve, so when the thing is full, or it stops, and I don't know, it's crazy stuff.
This inventor engineer, like Greg, knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anything to make your life easier, do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm very not that, by the way. I would like to be that, but you know the saying, work smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm.
I always find a way to work stupider. It's like I finish doing the thing and I go, oh, doing it that way would have been like 10 times better. But,
so then just do it better the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so
so after that, upgrading isopods. We already talked about this. Know when to upgrade your isopod. If you got them in a deli cup, upgrade them immediately. But don't. I've never had this go wrong. But if you've got like so many isopods that they are just crawling on top of each other, get them into a bigger bin or make 2 bins.
Making 2 bins is a good idea. Actually, that's something we should probably touch on as well. Having a backup colony and having multiple bins of one species, probably, if something does happen to hit one colony, at least you have your backup, you know?
Yeah, no, I don't do that, and that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
I haven't lost a colony since that one time where I let them dry out, because it friggin' hit me to the core. But that is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I when I was keeping isopods, I had multiple of each species I kept.
Yeah, it's just that would imply having 80 bins, so
it would imply having actually even more, because like the maculatum, the Armadillidium maculatum, which I said was like one of my favorite isopods, I had 4 bins of them. And the dairy cows, there was like 3, and so like it could even be more than 80.
So I had 3 bins of dairy cows, but then I just put them into a mega bin.
Okay, so maybe there's something to be said about keeping them in a giant colony instead of.
No, but you're right. If something cataclysmic happens, like, it's better to have
a backup.
But we do what we can. I'm just vigilant, and that's why like we've been talking about traveling and stuff like that. Like, it's hard for me to go away for like 3 weeks because I'll be worrying about things at my house.
No, it makes sense.
So, last but not least, pièce de résistance is breeding.
Our favorite topic.
Yes. Breeding. And having isopods.
It's like having shrimp.
It is like having shrimp. And if you are not killing them, you will be breeding them.
Yeah, they kind of do it themselves.
They do it themselves. Like some of them, like rubber duckies, say there are tricks to them, and I honestly don't really know the tricks. Sophia knows rubber duckies better than I do, but like,
is there like specific isopods will give you more in a clutch? I don't know if they're called clutches or not. Like, is one of the problems with the rubber duckies that they just give so little babies or mankai per clutch as opposed to like dairy cows? Or
I have heard, and I have seen this with many animals, is that like when you have a young female, they will give less potentially, and then they will eventually start giving more and more and more, and then maybe after a certain point they do less and less and less. But I've heard rubber duckies can give like 2 or 3 babies at a time. Like we should talk to Greg, because apparently Greg is breeding rubber duckies like no problem. So I don't know.
By the way, just for like, Greg is beneath the canopy exotics. I think you all our listeners probably already know who he is, but just in case you don't, anyway.
And so don't buy isopods expecting you not to have more of them. Like, it's like when we sell guppies, like we're like,
unless
you've got a
them
5 gallon, like keep only male guppies. You're not gonna do that with isopods. So expect them to breed, and almost everyone wants that. I've never heard of anyone not wanting that.
Why would you not want more?
So they give live birth. They're not leaving eggs on the ground. We're talking about how that works. I don't know.
There's a sack that they kind of hold the babies.
Oh, they do. So yeah, so if you like, sometimes what I'll do is, if I am, say, moving isopods, I'll have them in a clear bin and I will look underneath them. It's like a big, usually green pouch on their chest, and that means that they
chest or tail.
I think it's usually up.
Really? Okay.
I might be wrong on that, but it's usually up.
Okay.
And so those are pregnant ones, and you need to be careful with them. There are some people that will say that different isopods will breed seasonally.
Mm-hmm.
I have had it, not last year, but the year before, where suddenly in my house everything was breeding. I didn't really find that last year, but it's possible.
In my experience, I've never kept any of the fancier, harder to keep stuff, but all the ones that I've kept just kind of breed year round.
Yeah. But most of the time they're breeding year round. And yeah, it's especially important to keep them humid, because if they run out of humidity, they might die, but especially their babies and the pregnant mothers will die. Mm-hmm. And then they won't mold well. And so last but not least is us talking about the genetics. So a lot of these animals are relatives, and it just like you have.
Do you ever worry about like bottlenecking the colony?
So I'm observant, and as much as I can, I will occasionally add new members to the colony to spice up the genetics. But I have never. I do that. So I have never seen that happen with shrimp, and I've never seen that happen with isopods. But I am careful of that. But I am doing some things now that may test that theory for me.
Which is?
We'll get to that. Small animals are able to handle these things much better than big animals. If you think of like an animal that has 1,000 babies, not isopods, but like an ant or something. Like, think about an ant. They are all related to that one individual.
Yeah, they're all related to the queen, right? Yeah.
So
they might just not have it in their genes to have that problem.
Yeah. Or at least it's not really there. It's not really noticeable. So I am careful. And sort of like what I said about shrimp also, like, you think of them as a group, less than an individual. You keep an eye on the group. You make sure they're in good health. And when you're having babies appear, then that is a statement that things are going well. But yeah, so you do want to pay attention to genetics.
Yeah.
But for me, it has gotten to the point where it's becoming really interesting.
Okay.
Because I am seeing interesting mutations come out of my isopod bins. So there's going to be a lot of like relatives, say, like you've got like Lavis that have the orange and Lavis that have the dairy cows. I've never seen an orange come out of a dairy cow, and I've never seen a dairy cow come out of an orange. What I am seeing now is
dairy cows with no
spots
on them. Yeah.
And so they're called milkbacks.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
No, that's not what they're called.
They're not?
There is something else called milkbacks.
Okay, but is it not Lavis?
It is Lavis.
Okay.
It's a third morph. From my understanding, I don't know isopod morphs very well, but I believe there's the completely white ones.
Yeah.
Then there's something called a milkback that I think has patterning on the side. Hold on, we can just look this up. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. So there are morphs in isopods then.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so it's just like I was talking to you about the Cubaris we saw at the expo. Like, there were rubber duckies, which you think are pretty high grade. They're like $20 an isopod. And then there were Cubaris that were like $40 an isopod. And that's just like a different morph.
Yeah, see, these are the milkbacks. So they're I guess they have a white skirt and almost a black back.
Like I do have those, I would say, but I just think that they're a dairy cow. So yeah, what he's describing is like, it's all gray on the back and then white around the side.
Like the skirt is white.
So I am getting
So then all
pure
white, pure
whites
whites, yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
dairy cows, and I am isolating them
Cool.
with zebra isopods. So Armadillium maculatum.
Yeah.
You can get other interesting ones. You can get ones called chocolates.
Yeah, the browns.
Which are brown.
Yeah.
With the white stripe.
Yeah, I don't like those.
So a zebra isopod is a black isopod with white stripes. Then you get the brown ones. Then I'm getting ones that I call, which I honestly don't know the name, is called high whites.
Okay.
So instead of there being a thin white line,
It's a thick white line.
it is a thick white line.
That's awesome. Okay.
And even cooler,
Yeah.
which I only have like 4 of them, 5 of them, is an isopod that I'm calling Zebra X.
Okay, nice.
And they are completely white with a black line.
No way.
They are cool.
Those are appearing in your colony?
Yeah.
And you're isolating them?
I've isolated 5 of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
More of them are probably going to pop up.
I hope so.
Now the question is, you've isolated those 5. Will those 5 produce completely 100% zebra X's, or will you go back to regular Armadillium maculatum with those, like the regular zebras?
Okay, so probably my final chapter
Okay.
is Hoffman-Sagi.
Okay, cool.
So Hoffman-Sagi, as I said earlier, are big Spanish isopods that are mostly gray, sometimes a little bit of white around their sides.
Beautiful.
As you said.
Beautiful.
They are fairly neutral in color. They were my first giant isopod, and I like them very much. One day, I noticed that there were 2 babies that were more of a caramel.
Ooh.
And I was like, is this for real? Like, is this a different morph of Hoffman-Sagi, or is this just a molting isopod or something like that?
Okay.
Well, they grew up, and they stayed caramel.
Okay.
And I put them in their own enclosure, and they had babies.
Drum roll, please.
Half the babies are normal, and half of them are caramel.
Wow. Okay.
So now I have a good amount of caramel babies.
And you've separated them all again.
My next step is to separate the pure caramels.
Yeah.
And keep the ones that I would believe to be het caramel.
Crazy.
So for any of you non-breeders out there, heterogeneous, means that you only have one of the 2 alleles for the recessive trait. So what I always like to refer to it as like red hair. Red hair is a recessive trait.
Right.
My mom has red hair.
Okay.
My dad is Greek Cypriot. I don't have a hair on my head.
But it's not red if you had
it. Ain't red.
Yeah. If your dad had red hair though.
If my dad had red hair, it would be much more likely that I had red hair.
Correct, yeah.
And I am het red hair.
Right.
I could be completely wrong on this.
So if you had children with someone with red hair,
you
could have 50% of your children could have red hair.
If I was with someone who was het red hair,
okay,
I would probably have half children that are
red hair.
Half red hair and half that are not.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
And I think if I had with someone who had both genes that were red hair,
visually red hair, dominant red hair.
Yeah,
not dominant.
Maybe not. Yeah, it would probably be 50% either way because I'm het. But what I intend to do, and which is the same thing I've done with the koi guppies, is that I have a line of het caramel, and I am going to keep them together because I would say that they are probably more likely to produce caramel Hoffman-Sagi than, and I'm intentionally saying caramel in a funny way. It's a reference to Boondocks, but
reference to
Boondocks.
Okay,
but I have the ones that are het, that beautiful color that I am hoping to test out to see if they are producing the same babies.
Eventually, a couple of generations in, you will get 100%. Like, you should technically. Yeah.
Now the trouble is,
the
founding population is 2 isopods.
Yes. So again, going back to the.
This will be the test to see how well these isopods do.
Yeah.
I would love to find someone else who has them.
Yeah.
Maybe trade a few.
Yeah.
Or buy them. I've seen them online, but I've never seen anyone around have anything like it.
Okay. Would you be able to, in a couple of generations, breed them back to original Hoffman Segai and kind of restart the line, kind of mix in fresh?
So that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I would say that would probably be a good idea.
Yeah. If you don't find anyone else with, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if it's even necessary because like think about like parthenogenesis.
Yeah, morning geckos.
Morning geckos.
Oh, they're not there anymore.
We also might not have mentioned it. Dwarf white isopods are an entirely female species.
Yes, yeah.
Dwarf white
yeah.
females are always female. They're always cloning themselves.
Yeah.
That's why they're so
prolific.
Yeah, they just one gets in your enclosure.
It's done.
You're done.
Absolutely.
So like they talk about it with like reptiles. Like one reptile gets to an island and they're like, oh crap, I've got no one to breed with.
Yeah.
They become parthenogenic.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen all the time. But something clicks on. They're like, okay, now I'm gonna have a baby. So then it has a baby, and it mates with its baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are islands where you've got that low gene pool, and
or even if it's multiple adults that got there, but it's still just those like 5 to 10 adults, and then they yeah.
So like line breeding and stuff like that, like taking an animal, like say a reptile or a dog or anything like that, and like I'm gonna make this dog's head like super small.
Yeah, it always leads to problems.
Yeah, it leads to problems, and so I am not like psyched about doing that, but I just want to prove it out to see.
Yeah, you're curious
if it goes wrong, and like honestly, like I would never do this with a fish. Like even with my guppies, where like people are like, oh, keep the line pure, keep the line pure.
You never did,
that.
yeah.
I never do that, and people don't like some of the fish that I produce because of that.
Yeah.
I'm always mixing.
Yeah.
And if I can mix the Hoffman Tsangaris, I will. But for right now, I am trying to prove out to see if they can keep breeding successfully, establish a line of cool isopods in Ottawa, and learn.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's the end of my notes.
Amazing.
I think we've done a long episode here.
Yeah.
Do you got any further things you want to discuss, or have we pretty much?
No, I think we're good. I'm still a little bit on this topic of the genetics. There's, yeah. Okay. So just before we wrap it up, a couple more questions. So, first of all, have you heard of like, let's say koi, I don't know what, they're almost like Dalmatians. Is that kind of generally the same thing where there was like one that just came out with weird spotting and then they found another one with weird spotting, kind of started pairing them together?
I think so.
Okay.
Like the myth, which may be a myth about crystal shrimp.
Yeah.
And maybe I shouldn't even tell this story because I haven't looked it up. But the myth was there was always black crystal shrimp. So black crystal shrimp's like black, white, black.
Yeah.
One time, there was one red one.
And then now there's
a lot.
Okay.
So that might be a myth. And honestly, a lot of the things I've said could be fact-checked and could be proved to be wrong.
Yeah.
Because I am no expert. But...
So he says.
That is... I imagine so. Well, like, and that's how, like, our understanding of evolution, because, like, it's so stupid. I'm a teacher now, and I gotta be careful about talking about evolution. But that's how we understand evolution.
Right.
Like, it came from one or a couple things.
Yeah.
And then just keeps branching and branching and branching. And we've taken the natural evolution out of a lot of things. Natural selection is gone. We are feeding them a super amount, and that's good, and trying to keep them as healthy as possible. But I think so. I want to hope so. That like you just get this one isopod that is like, wow, that is a cool isopod. I'm gonna keep you, and then 10 years down the line, more people have them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then to counter that, what do you think of? And I don't even know if this is a possibility. Like I know you can breed like you can mix powder oranges and powder blues, and they do these things like they call them skittle packs or mixed packs where you have all these different colors because when you put them together you start getting browns and grays and I don't know what. But can you breed? Can you crossbreed different? And probably not because they're different like species. But can you crossbreed different species?
I don't know, and I haven't tried it.
Okay. And we probably shouldn't be trying it. I'm just curious.
I don't know if we shouldn't be. Like, it might even be good for them.
Mm-hmm.
But the people will say, like, oh, it's not good for
Keep
the
the
wild
lines-
population.
keep the lines
and stuff
pure,
like
yeah.
that. Like, bullshit. Like, they're not in the wild.
Yeah, and it probably could be
Um,
happening in the wild as well if they're crossing
And,
paths.
like,
anyway.
I've heard the argument about dart frogs, and that kind of makes more sense. Because
Yeah,
they're
I'm
not in the
totally with
wild.
it on the dart frog thing. Where yeah,
so-
I wouldn't recommend it, and I'm yeah.
I'm not fighting that. Like,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But that doesn't, like, if you're just talking about preserving a special color,
Yeah.
meh.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, there's,
Yeah. No, not the color. Yeah, I guess you wouldn't be. Yeah, you wouldn't be preserving the species anyway, because it's not like there's a lack of them.
no,
Yeah.
and,
I don't know. Yeah.
yeah, like,
The worry is always, like you said, 10 years down the line when different people have them, you're going to sell them to somebody, you're probably going to be honest. You're going to say, look, they're a hybrid, they're a mix of this and this. The next person might be honest too, but 3-4 people down the line, they stop being honest. Now somebody's buying isopods that they think are pure X, but they're actually XY hybrid.
yeah, but when does a hybrid become its own type? So,
Yeah, that's also a good point.
like, it's a sticky topic, and I am interested in listening to what everybody has to say. But I've seen guppies that get bent spines,
Yeah.
and their offspring are like, "Why did you bring me into this world?"
Yeah.
So, I'm not down with that,
Yeah, and of
and
course.
I don't want to do that to even isopods.
Yeah.
So we got to be careful. And the argument that, like, the animals are going extinct in the wild, so you should preserve a particular species, respect to that too.
Yeah.
But these isopods that I have in my basement in Ottawa are probably not going to repopulate Spain or
No, they're definitely
Thailand.
not. Yeah,
or
they're definitely
something
not.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely.
So me mixing them around, I haven't done it, and it probably wouldn't work for a lot of things, but maybe it would.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I've heard of people trying to mix oranges and dairy cows. Maybe it would work.
Yeah,
Maybe
what
I
do they
should
call
try
them?
that.
Orange cows? Orange.
Have you seen them?
I've seen pictures, but I don't know if they're that or just a different species being called. You know what I mean?
See, because the thing about dairy cows is that if you feed them a lot of carrots, they will
They
become
do
orange.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
So
I've seen that as
I
well.
don't know.
If you feed them a lot of, I used to use a lot of the North Fin fry starter, which is essentially all krill, and they would turn pink. Yeah. So that. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah.
So whether I just like isopods for me, like I like it because it's low stakes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And like the dart frog community is not going to come after me because
No. Yeah. Of course.
I'm mixing isopods even though I'm not.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the argument of like, you gotta honor what someone created and keep these guppies like as super pure as you can. That's just not the way I play this game.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, and so final question, and then we'll wrap this up. If you could give somebody advice on keeping not one, because as you said, like keeping one culture of isopods is probably pretty easy, but like someone that wants to have 40 bins like you, what would that advice be?
I would say figure out if you enjoy it and how to enjoy it.
And how to make it efficient.
Yeah, but that comes later.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I didn't enjoy what I do,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it.
Right.
And I didn't enjoy it as much last year, partly because the big part about last year is that I stopped working at the store.
Yeah.
And like being at the store with my friends, and we are constantly talking about the hobby.
Yeah, it makes
and
it. Yeah.
We're immersed in it. Like it did suck working on tanks at the store and then going home and working on tanks, but like I missed my friends.
Yeah.
And yeah, I missed a bunch of people. I missed you. I just missed the community.
Community, absolutely.
For me, like I am a social isopod. Like I want to share my hobby
Yeah.
I want to give things to people.
You want to enjoy it with the
I want people to give me things.
Yeah.
I just life is better when it's shared. So that's the way that I really enjoy things, is that I have a good group of people around me that can appreciate what I do, and I appreciate what they do, and we're able to kick it in your basement and have a beer and talk about things.
Yes, sir.
And we're able to go on trips, to go to a pet store, and we're able to go to a seminar and listen to somebody talk about isopods.
Yes. Or listen to this episode and learn about isopods.
That is the way that I know that might be a bullshit answer.
No, not at all. It's a very good answer.
Advice for any of the hobby. Like,
find a community, find your people, enjoy it, find a way to enjoy it.
And like, if you don't have a community, then that's fine. Like, maybe you're in a place, like maybe you're in Nome, Alaska, where there's nobody that has isopods.
Yeah.
Like, just connect with people online, watch the YouTube videos.
Or convince your neighbor to start keeping isopods.
Yeah, spread the sickness.
Yeah.
Just do what you can to enjoy it. I would say that is what I would recommend, because if you're not enjoying what you're doing, and that is an ongoing thing, find a good way to get out of it.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense.
They say in James Bond, always have an escape plan.
Always have an escape plan. Awesome. And let's us have an escape plan from this episode. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Theo, can you let everybody know where they can find you, where they can keep up with you?
Yeah, well, find me, find yourself, find everybody.
That's what you said last time too.
Yeah, this has been ongoing. Like, I've got like 180 followers. If you want to follow me, that's cool.
Yo, I think you should follow him, Nature State 7. You don't post enough, but you're going to start posting it more.
Yeah, maybe.
And he's a wealth of knowledge. If you're in Ottawa, come find him.
Yeah, come to the expos. Like, I might have a table at the Ottawa Expo. Come see this gentleman at the Toronto Awesome Expos that are friggin' awesome, that you should go to.
I agree. Use the code Daffy3 for $3 off your tickets.
Enjoy it and keep watching. I'm gonna convince him for himself, not for me. I don't have to be a part of it, to do an episode about you. Because from watching all the episodes, like, I've learned so much about everyone else, and if I didn't know you, I wouldn't know much about you.
Right. Yeah.
But it's been good. Thank you for having me on this podcast.
Thank you very much for coming on.
I don't know how long it's gonna be.
Yes.
I hope somebody out there in TV land enjoys it.
Yes.
And keep your stick on the ice.
Yeah, I like that. So once again, everybody, let's hear it for the Isopod. Theo, go give him a follow on Instagram, Nature State 7. Come find him at the Ottawa Pet Expo. There may be a table there called Nature State 7. Come buy some Isopods from the Isopod himself. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Give Nature State 7 a follow. You already know where to find me. We will see you all on the next episode.